Ioseb Stalin.
Ioseb Dzhugashvili. Dzhugashvili. Okay, episode 4, Russia, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics.
Yeah, Iosef Stalin.
Joseph.
Josephine.
Joseph.
The man of steel.
The man of steel. Okay, let's go. Right, so we ended on the death of Lenin.
Yeah, boy.
And his probable preference for Trotsky.
Yeah, boy. And why Lenin actually had not preferred Stalin.
Yeah.
Stalin being too messy.
The
bulldozer for the Bolsheviks.
He was ruthless.
Yeah.
Interestingly, an observer, I think, of society, of habit, of psychology. He had a toughish upbringing, Georgian. Part of those expropriations of bank robberies and whatnot in terms of raising money for the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party. Less of an academic, but a street smart guy. Bit of a thug.
I suppose Lenin's fear is that Stalin would have plunged Russia precisely where Russia was during the Civil War period. He did to an extent.
He's responsible for anywhere between 20 and 40 million deaths. Yeah.
Those figures...
Famine mostly.
Yeah.
In terms of straight out assassinations, purges is arguably between 300,000 and 400,000.
Yeah. It's interesting how those numbers are often framed. Stalin executed millions of people.
Well, he's responsible for the death of through his policies, collectivization.
Very different when you frame it like that.
But he did certainly have. The purges, the great purges. That's academics and generals and whatnot are murdered, and that's hundreds of thousands of people. Let's rewind a slight bit to 1924 to 28 is essentially the struggle for power.
Yeah,
between him and Trotsky, mainly. Devious acts, I think, from his part, political games. Pandering to those who support the NEP and those who are against it. Playing both sides, manipulative, smart.
Stalin would have been the Secretary General of the Bolshevik Party as well, which places him in a rather convenient position to play both sides and also to form alliances within the party to the exclusion, obviously, of Trotsky. Not even sending an invitation to Trotsky to Lenin's funeral.
Yeah. Well, I think, didn't he give the wrong time or something? I'm not actually too sure of the exact story, but something along those lines.
Yeah.
That it was...
Which for optics would have been very bad for Trotsky.
Yeah.
Sneaky.
Exactly. Devious. So there's that, and just playing... either side. The NEP becomes a focal point because it's the economic policy and it's essentially capitalist in its main, and it's hated by some, and it's put forward by others, and so he basically just goes along with it until it's no longer convenient. And then by 1928, which is essentially where this topic starts, there is he's ultimately successful, and he has Trotsky exiled, I believe, to Finland initially. I might be wrong on that. But he ultimately ends up in Mexico, Trotsky, and, jump forward 12 years, is hunted down by Stalin.
Pursued after,
by Stalin's men and assassinated in 1940. Because I think he was making waves down there, anti-Stalinist waves. So I feel echoey still.
No, you're fine.
Not, okay. in my own head. In your head, Rasi. Okay, 28. So I think we can argue that Stalin is the undisputed heavyweight champion of Russia by that point. He's gotten rid of his main opposition. He is the dictator extraordinaire, and he wants to now change the system. And so that's the beginnings, the removal of the new economic policy, and the creation of, his industrial plans, collectivization, and the 5-year plans, rapid industrialization.
Maybe worth mentioning, one of the main contrasts between Trotsky and Stalin would have been their view on how communism should be implemented. So Trotsky having a more international view of communism.
More Marxist view.
Yes, and Stalin looking more inwards. A stronger Russia can then project
socialism in one country.
Yeah.
So define that. The Marxist view of a what did they say? Workers of the world unite. So the dictatorship of the proletariat affecting all countries, a world revolution of workers. Stalin was, as you said, socialism in one country is his policy. It is, let's focus on Russia. We need to catch up with the West within 10 years, essentially, is what he said. Very prophetic in terms of foreseeing the issues, because very little trust. By 28, Hitler's not an aspect yet. Certainly does become so in the mid-30s. But the mistrust of the West, the mistrust of Germany in particular as part of the West because of World War I, and then, as I said, quite prophetically seeing that they needed to move from an agrarian state to becoming an industrial powerhouse in order to catch up with the West and therefore avoid being crushed. That's a key point. That's where rapid industrialization comes in. And I think logically speaking, we can all deduce that rapid industrialization would entail force to a large degree. Because you're not going to achieve, wouldn't say superpower, but certainly industrial powerhouse within 10 years is quite unrealistic.
It's unrealistically labor intensive. You'd have to essentially resort to slave driving people,
which is exactly
precisely what happened.
So socialism in one country involves rapid industrialization through the processes of the 5-year industrial plans, plural, and collectivization. And so, let's start with industrial 5-year plans. I think, the first one begins end of 28, 29, goes on for 5 years, so 32, 29, 30, 32, 33, if you include 28. And obviously, because Russia is agrarian, it doesn't have much industry, there is a need for infrastructure, meaning building railways, roads, etc. There's a need in order to industrialize to have electricity. So you need to build energy, an electrical grid. You need to coal mine for that purpose. And to build, you need iron. So you need pig iron and then obviously steel industry.
Yes.
And so those are the main things that are focused on.
The fundamentals,
Exactly, to start an industrial society. And so that is pushed, and it's pushed hard. And outcomes are projected and quotas are forced. And as we said, it becomes a kind of a push, and slave labor becomes a thing. Now, important to point out, I think you have to bring collectivization in.
Yes, I was actually going to ask, how do you actually finance all of this?
So collectivization is, let's define that first, is this concept of creating collective farms, joining small, unproductive or less productive farms together, into state-controlled farms. Now, there's two types: the Sovkhozs and I forget the other one, but essentially they're both states. So one is absolutely state controlled. The other is communities, but the communities are controlled by the state.
Yes.
So it's either way. It's state controlled, joined farms, larger farms, more productive farms, state financed farms,
equipment as well,
etc. And so they will then produce whatever the state says they must produce, and that produce in part will be sold to other countries to make capital, to pay for the industrialization of Russia. It also has it has a practical purpose, which is to create a proletariat.
Yes.
An urban working class.
Yeah.
Because without an urban working class, you can't industrialize. So who's going to suffer? The peasants,
yes,
who are the majority of the population, 80+% of the population, cannot all farm on these collective farms. And so it is a forced push of people into the cities to
urban
create
areas, urbanization.
Yeah, exactly. Now, some did that willingly. Numbers will vary, but they say about 1933 or so, 60+% had willingly moved, offer of a better life perhaps. Others didn't. And now when we mentioned the kulaks in the previous episode, this is where kulaks are, I think, created through propaganda. The kulak class is created in order to justify the forced removal of peasants into the cities if they go more willingly, with the threat of life or death. And if they refuse, they are liquidated, which is a wonderful term, meaning killed. Entire villages are destroyed in some cases, and others are sent to gulags, the infamous gulags, which are slave labor camps in the freezing regions of Siberia and whatnot of Russia, which is basically, it's not even high security because it's thousands of kilometers from civilization in frozen landscapes where if you escape, well, you're probably going to die in the cold. Yeah, so I mean, that's, collectivization is many-fold in terms of paying for industrialization, creating a proletariat, and just basically the backbone of the industrial plan. So something I pick up a lot in terms of understanding this is that there's an unawareness. These things are happening simultaneously.
Yes.
Collectivization is happening from, I think it was introduced in 1929, and it's happening throughout the entire period of industrialization, and the 5-year industrial plans are 5-year segments. We are going to focus on this, and then the next 5 years we're going to focus on this. As I said, the first one being heavy industry and that. Yeah. But collectivization is constant.
It's continuous, which would make sense because, again, supply of labor, food, income as well, to finance. So it does make sense that it's continuous. Yeah.
And so, as you said, food, I suppose, is the third aspect of collectivization, to feed that proletariat.
Yes.
So you're creating a more efficient farming system, which will hopefully provide enough food for this growing urban population. So that's, ultimately it. The system is harsh, and through that force. So let's back up a little bit. We're talking about Stalin. We're usually talking about. The topic normally goes around: did the means justify the ends? Was he successful in creating an industrialized powerhouse of Russia to avoid being crushed by the West? Yeah, he did, because they didn't get crushed by the West, and entered into Nazi Germany 1933. Not much going on there. Look, the Great Depression hits 1929, but 32, 33, the world, including South Africa, is struggling financially. The crisis of capitalism. Russia's doing its own thing on its own trajectory. We've had problems with that word in the past. And so, yeah, I mean, Russia's cruising along. It's fine. Fine, not for those millions dying. It's got its own problems. It's growing industrially. It's not declining. But as we said, during the success of that, and yes, when they signed the non-aggression pact, Hitler and Stalin, I think it was 1938. Hitler betrays Stalin in 1941, invades
Russia,
the Battle of Stalingrad. So he succeeds because Nazi Germany can't overwhelm Russia. And ultimately Russia marches into Berlin along with the Americans in 1945, and victory is theirs. Plunder and rape. And so very successful. And you have to take that into account. But 5-year plans with their quotas, with their unrealistic quotas, how is that achieved?
Well, terror.
Yeah.
Brutality. In part because the likes of the kulaks would have resisted, but also that's just the nature of such a rapid process. But also Stalin's paranoia, his enemies within the Bolshevik party. I mean, he did climb on a lot of heads to the top. So in part there is that sort of constant suspense that he might be ousted from power, but also the nature of what he's trying to achieve is just so taxing to society that it will inevitably lead to thousands, hundreds of thousands of deaths.
Yeah, so, I mean, slave labor, to meet quotas, there's that very famous propaganda campaign about, what's the guy's name, man? Who dug so many tons, there we go, so many tons of coal, in a day or whatever it was, and people should strive to do that. Look, I mean, there were campaigns that didn't involve death in order to incentivize, but I think mostly it was fear of the worst. Slave labor camps were very real. A lot of the work got done by that. We've already mentioned, the Kulak persecution, the liquidation of the Kulak people. Outside of that, as you mentioned, the purges, the terror, the great purges, were anyone who, this is what we were talking about earlier, that the hundreds of thousands of academics and the entire sort of leadership of the military, which was a very, very unconsidered strategic faux pas, a big mistake, because when you've removed all your experienced generals from World War I and that, you're kind of recreating a military leadership which isn't as experienced. But he had them removed because his paranoia said, I need leaders who are loyal to me. He removed pretty much every single old Bolshevik comrade from the original revolution, from the October Revolution with Lenin. So every single one of them was removed. And then, of course, that brought in the show trials of the mid-30s, the big show trials where he essentially forced these people to confess to, treason and whatever else, going against the nation, because socialism, communism is essentially the nation first. Put them on trial. There's no real trial involved. It's a predetermined issue. What is our production manager up to? And so, we had a situation where the now NKVD, the Czech-evolved, I suppose, the secret police, are committing terror acts all over, arresting people. If you were an academic, you were probably going to be removed, sent to a gulag, disappearing overnight. Stories of, kids saying that saying adults in later years talking on TV about how their parents disappeared overnight. People came in that night, took their father, whatever. He was an engineer or doctor or something, and he was removed. Now, was he placed in a kind of a forced situation of helping develop weaponry? Who knows? Or did he just get executed? And you'll never know because they never found out. But either way, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people through the Great Purges were removed. People who were probably academics, because academics question propaganda. Also, well, academics create propaganda too.
But definitely a threat to such a regime, because an educated population that can reason and cast doubt on what Stalin is doing, then that's greater resistance. And maybe a counter-revolution.
Yeah, well, yes, absolutely. Yeah. So it's so is he successful? Yeah, he's very successful. He creates an industrial power, but he does it at the cost of many lives. And collectivization is not successful at first, and it does contribute to famine in the mid-30s. Again, there's that reaction, same as the reaction to requisitioning of war communism in 1918, 19, 20, 21 under Lenin. Peasants, particularly kulaks, I suppose, or at least those who are accused of being wealthy peasants under this kind of anti-kulak campaign, are destroying their livestock again and burning their farms down and being punished severely by the NKVD. So it's a terrible time. It's a terrible, tumultuous time. But it achieves the outcome that it is intended to achieve. It just happens to cost many millions of Russian lives, which is, if humanity is a real thing, it's somewhat inhumane. It is rather inhumane. Yeah. The Stalin section is actually quite straightforward.
Yeah.
It's not anywhere near as complicated as Lenin.
No. I suppose because Stalin is rather, it's in a sense a continuation of Lenin, but in a different format. Whereas Lenin is transitional. Lenin is part of the transitional portion of Russian history, in a sense that they would have moved from an autocracy
to another
autocracy, and essentially trying to find middle ground and realizing that there is actually no middle ground. You have to actually pick a path. I think Stalin was more clear in terms of his vision for Russia, and just stuck with it amidst all forms of resistance, which, I mean, is, as you've already mentioned, was very costly to human life. But there's direction, there's clarity, nonetheless.
He's an interesting case, and I think Lenin started it. He does have I don't know that he respects women, in the sense that if you look at his personal life, arguably he's sort of causes his wife to commit suicide. Again, that's interpretive, but he does push for female literacy. Maybe that suits the state, that women are productive too. Creches in the workplace, so that they're not off work.
Could also have just been trust issues. How ambitious were women at that particular time, given that society, versus his male counterparts, who might have even taken him on for power? Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean,
either way, I mean, he certainly pushed for everyone being productive in society. Now, again, we know that was in many cases somewhat forced, but women were treated somewhat the same in the workplace. I don't know if they were paid the same. I mean, they probably were.
Probably not. Yeah.
Well, at the labor level, they probably were. I don't know. But they were certainly part of the labor force. Women, and there's lots of propaganda posters of collectivization and industrialization, and showing how women are part of that. Obviously, those are the upbeat photos where everyone's smiling and queuing up to be part of it. And the realities.
That would be an interesting discussion. The role of women in history. Do we have any of those sections in our curriculum? I don't.
Well, it certainly forms part of the of this section. I mean, yes. we do observe this kind of increased role of productivity in women. Yeah, I mean, you can look at, when we look at matric work and civil rights movements in general, we look at the women's movement. We're supposed to look at it. With time constraints. It's not examined. It's not examined in any aspect.
We could do an episode on it.
Yeah, but the role of women, not in light of a broader, I mean, I suppose it will always be in light of something, something a bit broader, but just as a topic specifically, I mean, I guess we don't look at the role of men either.
I mean, we're examining men who are generally the ones in power.
I suppose if you phrase it like that.
Yeah. You don't have to look at the role of men because men have been the predominant role in terms of that. Yeah. So anyway, that's pretty much Stalin in a reductionist nutshell. Yeah. What else? What are we not mentioning about Stalin that we should? He's prominent in terms of the sparking of the Cold War. I mean, he is the guy that is there in all the meetings, Potsdam and Yalta, and he's around for, when does he die? 53, I think. So let's argue 28 to 53. So that's 25 years of Stalinism. I suppose we could talk briefly about the cult of personality in terms of that, which we sort of touched on. But how do dictators, autocratic leaders, enforce their control in those days through?
Well, it's going to be nationalism right at the center of it. Well, himself at the center. Symbolism as well, flags, his portrait everywhere in Russia.
That's important.
He's sort of portrayed as a deity. In a way.
Well, he associates himself very closely with Lenin and I suppose Engels and Marx even. So who wrote the Communist Manifesto together. Because he wants to be associated with that sort of original revolutionary period, which is so heralded by the Russian people. I mean, Lenin is still heralded by the Russian people, or many of them, I suppose. His body's still in Red Square in that tomb on display, which is a bit gross, mummified. Stalin was actually, with this cult of personality, trying to create, as you say, sort of almost like a godlike image. His face everywhere, associating with all the heralded people, was somewhat renounced after he died, because I think that Stalinist period was so brutal and harsh that especially when Khrushchev took over, Nikita Khrushchev. In I think it was 56 or somewhere around, I'm not too sure, latter 50s. There was a push to kind of renounce Stalin's period and sort of say, look, that's not what we want to keep doing. I think there's a move back towards it, maybe. I think Putin might be a bit of a Stalin admirer. I don't know.
We shall not delve into that.
But I think it was, it was a very, very, very violent period of Russian history.
I think societies in general sort of pivot towards those type of leaders from time to time. I mean,
strong, manly.
Yes, because we literally started this section by looking at Tsar Nicholas II, who would have been the extreme opposite of what Stalin would have been.
Do you think extreme opposite?
I think so.
I mean, they're both essentially dictatorial, autocratic.
So the outcomes, ironically, are always going to be the same. We're going to end up in tyranny, regardless.
Do you mean in personality? Opposites.
In terms of, yes, in personality. So you have a very weak, fragile, incompetent Tsar.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And as a consequence of that, you have tyranny and suffering. And then you have a very strong-willed individual like Stalin.
I can go with you on that.
The outcome is tyranny, regardless.
So it's tyranny left or right, whichever route you take. All roads lead to tyranny. Yeah. So what's the conclusion of all of this? That feudalism doesn't work; it leads to tyranny. That communism has not worked; it's led to tyranny.
The capitalism pushed far as well, does lead to tyranny as well.
Can do. I
Yeah.
mean, listen, to be fair, the National Social Democrats of Nazi Germany were still following a capitalist sort of policy. Look, a lot of stuff was nationalized by the Nazi government, but there was capitalism. So it doesn't capitalism doesn't necessarily mean democracy. It doesn't have to mean that.
I suppose extremism in any direction is going to be a serious problem.
I mean, I've always had the theory of a cyclical kind of thing where you would have. Let's start with conservatism. Let's start with, Tsar Nicholas II, the Romanovs, a very oppressive conservative system. It's been around for hundreds of years. It's always going to lead to upset, miserable people who are, who've got nothing, the nobodies, the peasantries, etc., who eventually, for whatever reasons, usually starvation, will rise up and overthrow, and then hopefully you have a kind of a democratic period of liberal outcomes and taking into account people's rights, and then sometimes that gets maybe too liberal, too left, and democracy starts to become irrational, and there's no real structure and policing, and I think we've gone through this quite recently in our own societies around the world. And then because that inevitably leads to corruption and crime, and if you're not policing and the police become the enemy, which they have, defund the police.
Identity politics as well.
Yeah,
because I think that's one of the major issues with any form of liberalism, is that which model do we adopt when everybody has been given a voice? Unlike in conservatism, where this is the ideology, this is the hierarchy, comply. Now you've empowered everyone democratically. Which ideals do you enforce? And the moment you have to enforce anything, well, how do you deal with resistance to that ideal that you try to endorse?
And then there's a kickback, a reaction to that. I call it over democracy, which leads to conservatism, which leads to authoritarianism, and then you're back to the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think history's shown us that it just goes round and round and round. It's a cycle. It just keeps repeating itself, and it can go in different directions in terms of conservatism that is more a sort of traditional oppressiveness, or it can go into a very far left, socialist, communist, whatever, which ultimately becomes the same thing, becomes an autocracy, because those people have to maintain control. And how do you maintain control? Through oppression, through force, through secret police like the Cheka, the NKVD, the Stasi in East Germany, etc. It amounts to the same thing. It doesn't seem to matter which right, left they go, but it's still cycling in that, conservative, liberal, kickback, conservative, liberal, keep doing that. Revolutions and then counter-revolutions eventually. And some of these can take tens of years or even hundreds of years in the case of Romanov society and whatnot. Yeah.
Humanity.
It's a very ironic word.
Yeah, exactly. It is a very ironic word. Right.
Right.
Anything else to add? No. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Russia.